Happen. It's good advice, bad advice, worse advice. I'll start with you, Casey. Current events. What's your good advice on how security professionals should handle current events?
I think probably the first thing is to decide as a team whether or not you're going to actually respond at all or not. There's more than enough going on in the world that if you're kind of on the fence about whether or not this is a part of your input as a security team, you're going to get blown around in every direction. So decide that you're going to do it or not do it and start from there.
All right. Decision is your good advice. Katie, go in the opposite direction. What's some bad advice for security teams to deal with current events?
They should have no idea what technology they're using or anything the developers are actually doing. So that way they can remain blissfully ignorant while reading the news, knowing that it potentially doesn't apply to them.
All right. So you're going the other way of know nothing, so no decisions need to be made. Casey, coming back to you, give me worse advice.
I think only respond to an event, particularly in cybersecurity, if someone makes a website with a logo that describes it, and just use that as your chief heuristic. That's probably about the worst advice I could give.
It's pretty bad.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
Welcome, everybody, to Super Cyber Friday. My name is David Spark. I am the host of this very show. Today's topic is hacking current events. Whoops, what just happened? I didn't mean to do that. Let me close that. I just accidentally closed my window. I'm going to come right back to that. The topic is hacking current events, and the subtitle I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm going to get that window back up. Toot sweet. That's what I'm going to do as I click links and other items too. Ah, there it is.
There we
go. What do you know?
Look at that.
So now I'm going to share my screen once again. An hour of critical thinking about how what's happening in the world can affect your security program. All right. My guests for today's episode are, who you just saw right here. They are Katie Paxton-Fear, who's a lecturer in cybersecurity at Manchester Metropolitan University, and Casey Ellis, founder and CTO of BugCrowd. Hey, guess what? BugCrowd, they are our sponsor for today's episode. That's Casey's company. And by the way, let me just remind everybody, my two guests are Casey and KT. I'm going to try my best not to screw that up. Just try to follow along. All right, 7 different ways to participate in today's event. There's a chat room. Many of you have already discovered it. And by the way, a lot of you watch the show and you do not participate in the chat room. I would like to see a lot of new names getting involved in that chat room. So please do that. Now, today's bad idea is what not to say after you've been hacked or what not to say after a breach. That's what I want to see. What should you not say? All right. Also, how do we make it 10% better? Again, we're talking about current events and cybersecurity. How do we improve this situation? You can vote in our polls. You can join us on video at any time by just typing in the phrase "bring me on." Type that in. We'll try to get as many of you on as possible. And you can also ask a question at any time. Vote for your favorite question. You'll see at the very bottom of the screen, if you click where it says ask a question, you could type a question in right there. All right, our schedule. You saw good advice, bad advice, worst advice. Get your bad ideas in. Get your 10% tips in. We'll play the public interest later. Then we'll put the poll live of what not to say after you've been hacked. Then we'll play the Department of Yes. And we will also, right after that, put the poll live of how do we make it 10% better. And hopefully the 2 people that get voted up most in of the bad ideas, we'll get them on. For the worst idea, contenders will face off and we'll figure who truly came up with the worst idea. Last question, final advice. And then we will have our meetup. Which if you've not participated in that, that's fun. You get to have face-to-face time with your fellow cybersecurity professionals. And let me also mention, people have come to that meetup and been hired. So if you're looking for a job or you're looking to hire someone, it's a good place to be. Next Friday, our topic is hacking open source security. This is going to be actually a fascinating topic, and we're actually going to be delving into a research report of this very topic. So it's an hour of critical thinking of how to better secure non-proprietary software and environments. If you see at the very bottom of your screen, there is a link that says join us next week. Click on that link at any time during the show, and it will open up another window. You can register for it. You will not be taken out of this chat at all. You can register and still be in this chat. It's key to do that because if you register by 5 p.m. next Tuesday, that's August 2nd, you're automatically entered in a raffle to win a CISO Series jacket. In fact, somebody just posted, Gabrielle Silva just posted that his raffle win. And congrats to this week's winner, Marika Smith of 6 Clicks, who won. All right, enough of that nonsense, people. Let's get to our topic at hand. Get your questions in. Let me get to my first question. I'll start with you, Casey. High level here. What are the signals you need to be aware of when a big story in the news hits? And, the question is, and you were saying like make a decision at the very beginning, but my feeling is, how does it, does it affect you, your business, your industry? What can you ignore? What can't you ignore? So let's delve into that tip you had at the beginning of making a decision.
Yeah, definitely. Look, it comes down. I think a lot of this kind of what we're ultimately talking about here kind of amounts to threat intelligence. I think in the way that a lot of people think about it. What's happening from a vulnerability standpoint that could be used by a threat. What are threats doing out there on the internet? Like, is this relevant to me as an organization? And I think the idea of as a defender, going through and having a good idea of what you're likely to expect. Whose radar are you on at this point in time? Is it something that you can afford to just ignore and get on with, in spite of if there's conflict or a bug or different things like that?
Can you give me an example of what you can ignore and what you can't ignore? Like give me an idea of a decision you've seen been made. Like, oh, we can't ignore this. Oh, we can ignore this.
Yeah, I mean, my worser advice, whatever it was, around vulnerabilities that get logos associated with them. That's actually one that we see quite a lot. Because sometimes it does matter. Sometimes, the vulnerabilities that get released that have a big splash about them are pretty important. And you need to go off and sort them out. Log4j is a good example. But then there's others that come out and it's more sizzle than it is sausage. If the organization has a process to be able to actually evaluate that before they all freak out and lose their weekends, that's a pretty good place to be.
That's a good point. And hold on to that because I want to come back to that, the freak out, because I think emotions run high with big news. And I'm going to throw this to you, Katie. Sometimes, how do you get emotions out of the way of logical decisions? Because I'm sure they run high. Because when you get the news scaring the crap out of everybody and your C-level executives, I got to assume people start freaking out. Yes?
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot that vulnerabilities, hit Twitter. And then Twitter sends them from potentially being obscure to being all anyone is talking about. Yeah. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in like discussions on social media and really forget, wait a second, are we actually even using that technology in the first place? Is this something that we actually need to care about? I think often, social media, especially around security professionals, because we're often using Twitter as both a threat intelligence source and to post inane stuff about our lives and keep it up after hours.
And poop posting as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not to cuss on the.
Lots of that.
By the way, Katie, would you do me a favor? Either shift yourself or shift your camera so you're not kind of sliding off the screen. So no, other way, other direction. Yeah, we want you in the center. There you go. Perfect. Okay. Awesome.
That's so weird that showing as being off center for me.
I'm interested to know how people deal with, because where does the problem lie, Casey and Katie, in that, or it could be both places, because notoriously the security department is the most paranoid group out there. But at the same time, and we've all heard this, because so much security news is hitting the mainstream news first, not what it used to be. It used to go trades and then bubble up, but it's going the opposite direction now. What happens is your non-security senior staff start seeing this, and I'm sure the classic line of, hey, this log4j, is this something we need to be worried about? Like, or this, I'm hearing that there's, North Korea's beefing up attacks. Is this something we need to worry about? That line, I'm sure, happens a lot. What's the best way a security professional responds to this?
Yeah, to me, it's really dividing the input that you're getting, between it being tactical and something that needs to be responded to very quickly, or something that's more of a strategic shift. So in those two examples that you gave, like log4j versus, the DPRK doing something a bit different. Like Log4j was one that, it was basically a tools down. Like we need to actually go off and get onto this straight away type of thing legitimately. And it did get surfaced through Twitter. So you could argue that that was an example of what we're talking about right now, actually doing its job. With, a change in TTPs from a nation state, that's probably not going to manifest itself in the next 6 hours. Do you know what I mean? So with that sort of news, like being able to pass the input and say, do we need to really stop what we're doing and actually be led by what we're hearing from the outside, or do we have time to actually sit back and form a broader strategy? An example of where this was pretty important was the lapsus stuff with Okta recently, right? Like that was an example of what I refer to as remote journalist execution, where you've got people that are basically creating clickbait, and then that got picked up and amplified. All of a sudden, the story got around the world a couple of times before the truth had an opportunity to put its pants on, to borrow the Churchill quote there. And in hindsight, it wasn't as severe. It was still obviously an issue, but not as severe as it was initially presented. So, working out whether you need to go fast or slow, I think is kind of the first step when these things come in.
And Katie, isn't there this feeling that you need to kind of get ahead? Like, obviously senior management's going to ask us about Log4j. Obviously they're going to ask us about Labs. It's like we should be prepared to give a very concrete answer to them. And I've heard, like, I remember it wasn't this case. It was actually the Capital One breach where I was talking to a friend who worked at a major bank, and he said, "Oh yeah, I put together a presentation and showed everyone like why the Capital One situation wasn't going to happen to us." So I got to assume there's got to be kind of all hands on deck. Like we need to just communicate this in a logical way to senior management rather than, "Oh, don't worry about it." You can't say that line to them, can you, Katie?
No, I think a lot of the skill in being in cybersecurity is really telling people when they need to worry and when they don't need to worry, and making sure we're not just telling them, hey, you don't have to worry about that, but actually trying to get them to understand what a vulnerability is. I always use the example of my mum. My mum does not know how to use a computer. She doesn't use a computer. She barely uses a smartphone. She doesn't know how to send a message to a group chat. That's the kind of level of technology my mum is. But she does listen to the radio. And so she'll hear about some of these incidents. I actually spend a lot of time talking to her and telling her, what's actually happening, like kind of almost like de-techifying it, kind of like translating it for her. So she actually really understands actually what's happened. Because I think a lot of the time we don't give people outside of security enough credit. Like people understand security risks. They understand, don't give out your passwords. They can understand something more like, oh, if you have multiple factors, you're more secure, because if you have multiple pieces of information that only you can know, then that's a lot more secure than having just a single password. So I really don't think that we give really sort of regular people enough credit for that. They can understand about security breaches, and they want to understand as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you either of you give me an example of how you, and it could be like, hey, we didn't have to worry about it, we do have to worry about it, and this is what we're doing, and how that was communicated. Like, what's like a best case scenario of how you've handled a situation like this? Casey, I'll throw it to you.
Sorry, I was just addressing something in the chat there. I mean, the best case scenario of how to handle this is that you're able to be transparent. A really good example I can think of is actually the Canva incident that happened a couple of years back, where they basically, and they later came out and actually agreed with this, they kind of false started on the initial response. It's like, it's fine, we take your security seriously, we're on top of it, all good. And that had a lot of backlash from the users for exactly the reasons Katie just kind of pointed out, right? They've got like a very large user base of folk that have different levels of sophistication when it comes to understanding security, but they're all computer users, and they're all like, this doesn't quite make us as comfortable as you might think it does. And what they then did was basically go back, burn down the issue, work out exactly what had gone on, and put together a plan on how to mitigate, and then figured out how to communicate that mitigation strategy to their layperson almost audience in a way that actually, I think, did did quite a good job. Like, it didn't, I wouldn't say it like made it all go away and turn it into a win that was just a non-event. But in terms of it being successful and actually kind of converting or translating to them as transparency and trust, I think they actually achieved that.
I'm sorry, I cut you off early though, Katie. You were going to answer this about like a best example of how to sort of demonstrate either how you communicated not to worry about it or to worry about it as well. And not to worry about it, but I mean like what we're doing to handle it. Excuse me.
So I'm always reminded when I was a developer, way before I was into like the security industry, I used to work for an SME, like small medium enterprise, and they had a call center. They do standard sales, and I was on the IT department. And one time I came in, I got my coffee as normal, and I noticed the website stopped working. Why did the website stop working? Oh, the entire server was currently being encrypted because it'd been hit by ransomware. For the second time, it's already happened. This is the second time it's been hit. And the director of the company came up to me and was like, do we need to shut down the sales floor today? And I think that kind of really clear question about business needs and operationally, is this an account? Is this something we can recover from within the next, say, 3 hours? Or is this something that's going to take 3 days? Is this something that's going to put us offline for a bit? Really understanding what a business needs operationally and being able to communicate it to be like, unfortunately, this is going to take us 12 hours to restore the backup. There is no way the sales floor can open today. So that was a really clear kind of signal for them.
All right, we got a new game that we're going to play. Or not a new game. It's a game we play all the time. But here.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right, here's the game. You know how it's played, and our audience can play along as well. It's a simple game. Let's play. Most average monthly search queries, again, this is everybody, not just people in security. What do you think they search for more, the word breached or hacked? Katie and Casey, what do you think?
I'm going to go with hacked as the more kind of provocative term. Like it's got more like pop to it.
All right, what do you think?
I completely agree. Yeah,
hacked?
Breached. Hacked is the term people use.
Hacked is all right. I'm getting most B's in the chat room, a few A's, and the correct answer is it is hacked. It is almost fourfold more popular. All right, so 1-1, you're tied. Next one. By the way, I should tell you, we only play 4 questions here. It's actually quite difficult to come with 4, get 4 out of 4. Not many people do it. All right. Next one. Most average monthly search queries for cyber news or security alert. What do you think?
I'm going to go with security alert on this one because there's just a lot happening and everyone's like, what do I need to focus on? News is more like general information, whereas alert is more like, what do I need to drop and look at right now?
All right. We get a mix C's and D's coming in. Somebody's already answering E. We don't have an E yet, Peter.
Let's go for E.
Katie.
This is so hard.
Yeah.
So I think it might be C because I think people want to keep up with news more, but I'm not sure. This is hard.
All right. So the good answer, by the way, that's a great tease for our show, Cybersecurity Headlines. If you're not currently listening to it, we do that every week. Every day, I'm sorry. It's 6 minutes every single day. You get 8 of the most important stories in cybersecurity news from Cybersecurity Headlines. And we do a week in review show, which is going to be 90 minutes after this show ends. Let's see. The answer is Katie wins. All right. 2-1.
Nice.
Almost twofold there, too. And I think, by the way, your rationale, I think that's why it's true, Katie. Good answer. All right. Most average monthly search queries, cyber attack or insider attack. What do you think?
I'm going to go with E because it's the term that you hear most on the news, like going kind of indexing off that last answer, the fact that like the consumers, what they're looking for and how, newscasters and all that kind of thing tend to talk about it. I go with cyber attack.
It's almost universal E here. Are you going with
I think
E?
I think
Okay.
E as well. It's for the same reason, really.
All right, let's see what the correct answer is. It is E, almost a tenfold difference.
By a wide margin.
Yeah, wide margin. All right, last one. Whoops. Be aware or pay attention. What do you think?
Gosh. I respond poorly to either one of these when I get told.
By the way, I want to point out,
safe.
Katie, you are 3 for 3. You
I know,
are
the pressure
2
is
for 3. So
on.
if you get this one, you'll be 4 for 4. What do you think?
I know. Oh, I think I'm going to go for pay attention. And it is solely because as part of my like regular day job, I have to teach students. And I can imagine Googling how to make students pay attention. So that's kind of my rationale there. It's not cybersecurity related at all. I'm just guessing.
No, this is general. Yes. What
That's
do you think?
actually...
So pay attention. What do you think?
I'm going to go. Well, I mean, this is how I maybe tie with Katie, but also I can see kind of people saying be aware of blah blah, like how to be aware of blah blah.
Good
so
point.
I'll go with G.
And the correct answer is no, Katie, 4 for 4. Good job, excellent.
Well done.
Again, that is a rarity. That does not happen. Did anyone else in the chat go for 4 for 4 as well? Good job, excellent job, Katie. Excellent job. All right, let's get back. We have a few questions. Actually, one came in from Ed Contreras, who's the CISO over at Frost Bank. And he asks, I am curious if the SEC or DHS, quote, public statements force their topics to the top of your inbox for a comment. That's a good one. I'll start with you, Katie. What do you think? Is that happening? So you're in England. When he's saying, does it affect you in England?
I'm translating this to NCSC, which is our version of like CISA. Not really. I feel like mainly it's kind of it tends to be like what's hitting like BBC News. Like I remember things like the war in Ukraine, and we saw like cyber like war, cyber like vigilantism. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, and it's just it's like I tend to see it more in popular news more than whatever a government has said. Hey, this is what you need to care about.
What about you? What's your answer?
Yeah, I look. I think the CISA advisory stuff, particularly as it's related, like seeing it ramp up through the COVID period, and then seeing that kind of escalate in terms of how they've addressed the Russia-Ukrainian conflict and kind of cybersecurity fallout from that. Mm-hmm. The fidelity of the information from that source, I've always found to be quite high. So, for that reason, like as you can imagine, where I'm sitting, there's Twitter, there's the crowd, there's all the stuff going on inside Bugcrowd, there's a billion other sources, and I'm always looking for kind of the linchpin signals that can give context to all of the others. So I kind of index for a high fidelity source, which is why I will tend to pay attention to that type of source. Did you mention SEC? Because I think on the policy side of it as well, that particular, the SEC, particularly the change around reporting of cybersecurity expertise on a board to the SEC, that's one that I'm actually watching very closely and have been for quite a while from an industry standpoint, because it's basically the SEC starting to like try to shoehorn cyber risk into just overall business risk management from a public market standpoint, which is a huge, I'm not sure that like not a lot of people are starting to pay attention to how like radically altering that is to our industry just in general. But I think that's actually a pretty big thing. So yeah, I'm a nerd though, so I'm not necessarily representative of everyone in that answer.
All right, we're going to get to more questions in just a second. I do want to mention that our poll is live, of our best bad ideas, and there's a lot in here, but you can quickly scan them because they're very quick. Remember, it's what not to say after you've been hacked. Tell us which one's your favorite. So please go ahead and get in there and vote for what not to be saying.
The chat is hilarious on this.
Yeah, there have been some very, very funny responses. By the way, you can still submit while you're not in the poll here. You can still submit because by Tuesday of next week, we announce the best bad idea winners, and that person will win a CISO Series fleece. So what you have to do is you can keep submitting. You think you can top what's even in there right now. And also, let me just remind you, please click on the link at the bottom to register for next week's topic, open source security, hacking open source security. Please register for that. In fact, please register because after that, we're going to be dark. It could be a whole month. We may have one more show in the month of August, but I'm definitely going to be dark for the next 2 weeks following that as well. All right. Let's move on to our next question. Oh, we did have a question, though, just quickly. Ian Pointer wants to know, Katie, when your mother starts to talk about a security item in the news, how do you handle that?
So my mom, to give you a bit of context, my mom is an artist and she has artist brain. And you've ever spoken to an artist? the way they think about the world is chaotic. It's very chaotic. So it kind of jumps around, but I kind of try and break it down to her. So she was worried the other day about, she was saying, "Oh, Katie, will you go and sort out the Russians?" Look, the Russian, and I'm like, okay. What? And she'd heard like half of a story about like Russia and half a story about the UK and half a story about the current elections that are happening here. So for me, it was giving her that more context. Like, what's Russia doing? Like, what is Russia doing? And it's like, you know what? You don't need to worry about that. You're an individual. They're not coming after you. They're not coming after me. They're coming after like British Gas or like Eon. They're coming after like critical national infrastructure. They're the ones that need to worry. You are fine. And then she'll ask more information. I'm like, well, if you were attacking a country, what would you rather do? Would you rather hack your Facebook account that you never use, or turn off all the electricity for every house in the UK? Which one would you prefer? And
that's a tool I use all the time as well. It's like, think about it. Put yourself in the shoes of Blat. Like, what would be most important to you, and try to.
If you were a supervillain, what would you do?
Dude, by the way, I wonder, is figuring out how to communicate this to our parents the best sort of training ground for communicating to the staff? Casey, you're nodding your head.
100%. Well, I kind of learned this. I mean, I've been in security since high school, right? But then with BugCrowd and then learning how to basically put together a pitch, like articulate the idea to VCs, all that kind of stuff. Not to say that, folk in that domain are whatever, what we're talking about from a tech savvy standpoint, but you've got to cater to the lowest common denominator. You got to make sure that what you're saying gets across and lands. So I think I'd used to do, and still do sometimes, is anytime I get into an Uber or a Lyft, it's like set myself the goal of articulating the thing that I'm trying to talk about in 30 seconds, not use any jargon, and then get them to actually lean in and ask a kind of a follow-up question and actually refine how, simple I was able to articulate it based on that. That was incredible training. Twitter, weirdly, like less so these days because Twitter's gone a bit strange. But 10 years ago, it was a really good place to learn brevity and learn how to make sure that you've got a concept packaged in a small space, but like as difficult to misinterpret as you can make it, which I think is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have in cybersecurity. It's not meant to be here in the first place, so it's hard to explain sometimes.
By the way, the tip I will also add to this, and I think I've mentioned this on the show before, my wife and I figured this out. My wife is also very tech savvy. There's another dynamic when you're trying to explain technology to your own parent, because then there's sort of the parent-child relationship. So what my wife and I have done is we offer tech support for our respective parents. So she helps my mother out and I help her
That's
mother
smart.
out. And that
That's
has
smart.
helped tremendously.
That's very clever.
That has been huge. That was a wise move we made that has saved our butts in a big way. All right, let's get to some more questions. Is this a new one or no? That's the same one. All right, I got plenty more. Let's actually talk about the different ways you prepare. Let's talk about some really classic examples of, let's say nation state attack and like a open source thing like Log4j that's affecting everybody. What are some classic common ways we have to prepare, Casey?
I mean, Katie kind of called it out earlier on, like knowing your attack surface and your environment as best you possibly can, I think is a preeminent thing to do in order to be able to respond with all of the different variations that this might actually imply, right? Because you don't necessarily know, like what we saw over COVID was nation states moving from very stealthy, targeted attacks to more kind of widespread, using like ODA from Exploit Hub against unpatched remote access systems, for example. That's not necessarily a behavior we've seen the usual suspects deploy before, because they like to keep things a bit more quiet than what they've done over the past 3 years or so. So, understanding what you've got and understanding where there's going to be potential impacts if you have, inbound information, like this actor is going after this system. If you've got that system, you need to do something about it right away. If you don't know what you've got, then that's impossible to use as a piece of information. So that to me is step one on that side.
All right, Katie, your thoughts and essentially adding to what you had said earlier.
Yeah, I think so. There's two very different ways of looking at it. One is know what you have, but the other is if you are in a situation where you're going to come under like nation state level attacks, no amount of like reading the news is likely going to help you. By the time it hits the news, it is too late for the organization you work in, because likely
this is like
the power's already
investing.
been shot.
Same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think the best thing you can do if you are in that situation is, again, know your attack surface, but also know your adversaries really well.
Yeah.
If you're a journalist in a country that doesn't like journalists, you are going to come under attack by probably something like mobile malware. Don't click any links. That's when you take the whole advice, don't click any links at all, because any link that's even from somebody you know could infect your device with mobile malware. Now, this is quite different from if you're just using like open source software, and it requires a very different way of thinking about who's coming after you, what risks do you actually personally face. And I think, they're two very different ways of thinking about security.
All right, we got a call that just came in.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right, we have two awful things to say after your after someone's been hacked, or after you've been hacked. And the first one comes from Ian Pointer, and I'm throwing this to you. Remember, Department of Yes, you have to say this is exactly what we're going to say after we've been hacked. All right, and that is, Casey, get ready for this. Our thoughts and prayers are with your data.
Yeah, I'm actually in America right now, so it's difficult to answer that one with that. No, I think it's on brand with how a lot of other things have been responded to over the past couple of years. So, there's consistency. I think that makes sure that the message lands solidly with your audience. It reflects empathy.
Casey, I don't like this answer. Katie, there's a better answer here. I know what it is. Here, go. Katie, give it to me. Why are you going to say this?
Because I would go with what Casey said. It's what we say with other tragedies, right?
Right,
so
but why are we saying that with other tragedies?
Because there's nothing we can do now. It's already happened. We can
nothing we can do. Yes, it's happened. There's not a darn thing we're going to do anymore. And also, it's a way of saying that I'm doing something with doing nothing. Because my thoughts and prayers are with you. I'm doing something. Thoughts and prayers. All right. This next one actually comes from Katie, so I'm going to have you answer it. Katie. What not to say after you've been hacked? It was all public anyway. Why do you actually want to do that, Katie?
It reassures people. If it's all public anyway, there's nothing you have to worry about. And it gives people that gentle reassurance that lets them know that we, multinational conglomerate, really don't care about them.
Yes. But it wasn't all public, was it? But you're saying it was all public, right?
Well, I mean, it depends what little API endpoint, what little application was public the entire time. Public-ish. Yeah.
All right. KC, why do you want to say this? It was all public anyway.
Look, I mean, when we were trying to figure out how to get cryptography right, there was this idea of the enemy knows the system. You never design cryptography without assuming it would fall into the hands of the enemy. We've just done that with our business. our data and our applications. So, this is literally best of breed, best practice security going on.
You have redeemed yourself. Good job, Casey. Good job. Excellent. All right. Now, here's what's going to be interesting. We've never had this situation where one of the hosts actually had one of the winning bad ideas. So in just a few minutes, we're going to bring Ian Pointer. Ian, hopefully you've got your camera and microphone working. And KC, you will be the sole judge of whose idea truly was worse.
All right. Sounds
so
like
you got to be impartial here. I know you invited KD to be a part of this, but I want you to think about just solely about the bad ideas. So we'll do this in just about 5 minutes. So let's get to some more questions at hand, of which we got to deal with. Oh, this is an interesting one. So this goes back to your comment, Katie's like, if you've read it in the news, you're too late. And so, and also you saying like, we're getting our information from Twitter as well, which is a little bit more real time. Abjit says, quote, I read somewhere hackers start scanning 15 minutes after a vulnerability is disclosed. Your views on this. Is that true? I mean, is it going that quickly?
Oh man. So I made a video where I looked at a CVE and I was like, how long did it take before it started to be memed on Twitter, right? It took 3 days for a CVE to become a meme about, oh my God, everyone's scanning this. I can absolutely believe that's true. And I absolutely know people who sit there looking at Twitter, looking for CVE proof of concepts, like the code that fires it. Mm-hmm. And being like, I can scan this on my massive data set of bug bounty programs and submit it to all of them. I might not get a hit or I might get, several hits, but I can absolutely believe that's true. 100%.
So Casey, my guess is you probably have some data on this. Is that true? I mean, do you see this?
Yeah, a lot of war stories and a few lost weekends and a bunch of data to support the idea. I mean, what Katie's describing, what you're talking about, David's exactly right. Again, Log4j is as like the recent example that everyone can relate to. The minute that POC dropped, there's actually, I screen capped it and I use it in a talk at 7 p.m. I think Bay Area time. Someone in Australia saying this is going to be a problem for us. And of course, by the time the sun came up here the next day, the internet was on fire. And it's exactly that. Like people understand, the simplicity and the impact of an exploit chain. They pick it up, especially with something as widespread and easy to exploit as Log4j. Like it's going to go more quickly in proportion to how much that's true. But what also happened was, folk like Cloudflare has started to put in WAF rule mitigations, and there's all this research being done on evasion, all these different things sort of happening back and forth on the researcher side, but also you can presume, and I actually know for certain on the malicious adversary side as well.
All right, let me just remind everybody to click on the link at the bottom of the screen to register for the event that's happening next week. So please do that as well. And we are what do we got? We're just a few minutes from Ian joining us. So Ian, be ready to join us in just a couple of minutes as well. So should we also be having a conversation about resiliency if you physically can't react in 15 minutes, to every, vulnerability that's exposed, it's going to be, abuse you. Do you have a conversation about news going to hit, vulnerabilities are going to be exposed, we're not going to patch them in less than 15 minutes or know about them in 15 minutes, let alone patch. So how do we make ourselves more resilient? What is the conversation that happens at that point, Casey?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan and proponent of anti-fragility in design. And then if something's already been built, trying to figure out how you can retrofit or reduce it back to introduce anti-fragility for exactly this reason. We've got an engineering mantra within Bugcrowd, build it like it's broken. So it's like, okay, we're going to do all of the things that we can to keep people out from a prevention standpoint, but let's assume for the sake of construction, architecture, what we do with data, so on, that those things fail at some point, and the job then becomes to limit the blast radius. and what's actually available to an attacker at that point. So, the challenge with that is it's hard to do in hindsight. It's easy to do when you're building something from the ground up. It's a lot more difficult, I think, to retrofit that, especially over like a large organization that's sprawling halfway across the internet. But I think that concept is basically the core of it.
Mm-hmm. Katie, what's your theory on like I mean, because this kind of takes us out of the conversation about current news. It's just like, well, things are like this are going to always happen. It's not going to change, and we're not going to catch it on time. So, and I'm going to totally play devil's advocate. It's like, well, does it even matter to follow the current news? Because something's going to always happen. It's always going to be there, and we're always going to be too late. Like, at what point are we taking advantage of this? And what point is like, there's nothing we can do, Katie?
So this kind of goes back to my story about the ransomware attack, because we caught that as it was encrypting the files. And you know what we did? We, 3 bright engineers, we went into the server room and switched the power off. You need the off button for other really complex systems. If you know you're using Log4j, for example, and you see the POC drop on Twitter, then you need that emergency off button. You need that, okay, is this actually operationally what we need right now? No, probably not. I mean, it's logging, like, you can probably turn that off in some cases, right? You don't need that to be on. I really liked that it was found during Minecraft. But the question is, do you need a Minecraft server up at this particular moment? No, probably not. Like, just tell them it's going down for 6 hours. And there's certainly, like, some organizations can't do that. They have to have that resiliency. And at that point, you've got to have an instant response team. You've got to have a plan in place. You've got to have, really clear teamwork. But also, sometimes you just need, like, the off switch. Sometimes you just need to unplug it and go, well, I'll deal with that tomorrow morning.
I think this goes back to because, like, in principle, I completely agree with that. I think it does. There's a lot of examples where ransomware in healthcare, for example, that's less of an option. But extending from that example right back up to where it's trivial, it really becomes this issue of weighing the business cost and the business impact of denying service to the thing that you think might have been compromised or might be at like extreme risk against the potential for it to get compromised and like bad things to happen as a result of a hack. So the challenge, I think, sometimes is that the ability to make those decisions on the fly. You've got a lot of potential future math that plays into that can slow the whole thing down. And but the whole idea of if you need to yank the plug on things where that can be done, like make sure that you've got the ability to do that and people know what the plug is.
We're going to come back to this right after this point here. This is a really hot topic that I want to address some more. But I have Ian Pointer, who has one of the horrible ideas. So it's actually going to be you, Katie, and Ian going at it with each other. So let me explain to you. Think WWE wrestling throwdown. You're going to explain why. Ian, you're going to be explaining to Katie why her idea does not even touch the badness of your stupid idea. And Katie, vice versa, you're going to do that. And then KC, you have to then be the judge of saying, well, I think this one's worse. And again, this is really a risk management exercise. Which one really would cause the most damage here?
I feel like I should change my name.
There you go. All right. So I will throw it to you, Ian. Ian, why is your bad idea? No, you're first. Why is your bad idea the worst? Or the thing that you say, which is, let me repeat again, our thoughts and prayers are with your data. Why is that truly the worst thing to say after being hacked?
Well, I think you all covered it before. It's completely vapid. It has absolutely no meaning. It doesn't make people comfortable. It tries to make you look holier than thou. So you can say, oh, I really care. My thoughts and prayers are with you. And then behind their backs, you're like, ooh, I don't care. It's not my data.
And why is that better than Katie's, which was, it was all public anyways?
Well, I think, if you say your thoughts and prayers are there, then it sort of feels like you're just meek and weepy. Whereas if you say, it was all public anyway, you're just being callous. And that doesn't come across very well.
All right.
whether
So
you're lying
you
or
think
not.
yours is far worse than Katie's, yes?
Oh, I think it's much more insidious. Yes.
Okay, insidious. All right, Katie, argue why yours. Again, we're talking about risk management. Which one will cause more damage? Which thing? Explain why you think yours is better in terms of the worstness.
Oh, I think if any company tweeted that, they would get ratioed very hard. It would be a case of people genuinely making fun of them, and I think it would probably end up with like, an Ig Nobel Prize kind of level of poor response. So I gotta say, like, I just think it would go crazy on social media, and I think my mum would see it as well. I think my mum would see that, call me, and then be like, "Oh my god, Katie, I'm outraged about this
I think
thing I've
people
just
would be
heard that this
outraged by
company has
either
done."
comment. I think either comment would outrage. Trust me, they would cause a Twitter feud on either comment. All right, I'm throwing this to you to Casey. Casey, you have to determine which one truly is the worst.
I would, yeah, I'm gonna go with thoughts and prayers, because to me, it's what it belies is the fact that there's no ownership, there's no acceptance within the organization. Like, at least saying, you know what, it was out there anyway. At least someone's thinking about it and actually sort of taking some degree of
And
ownership
by the way,
for
a
what's actually
percentage
going
of
on.
that data was probably already out there.
And it's also technically probably more true at the same
Yes.
time. I do think it was all public anyways would create the bigger fuss from a PR standpoint, but I'm answering from a security perspective, not necessarily from a marketing one.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Congratulations to Ian for coming up with that incredibly insipid and insensitive
awesome.
comment to make after getting hacked. Thank you.
I
By the way,
had
you can
some
still
help.
get in bad ideas to be eligible for the fleece, which we decided. All right, we got 15 minutes left. And oh, by the way, the 10% poll is up. Let's see, has anybody started voting on the 10% poll? Yes, a few votes have up. Here's one, and by the way, speak up if this is you. Have a weekly internal security video newsletter that hits on any main highlights from the past week and how it pertains to each company's department. This is interesting. Bonus points if you break the newsletter up by department so it's shorter and people actually check it out. So it's just sort of like a educating tip of like, hey, you're probably wondering, you probably saw this in the big news. This is what you have to worry about. Do you know anybody who actually does this? KC, nodding your heads. Yes?
Yeah, not weekly, but yeah, we do it.
You do it. Explain.
Yeah. We've got bug of the week, which is more often kind of bug of the month or bug of the time period that we try to keep fairly regular. But it's really talking about like how the research is interacting with people that we're working on behalf of with the platform, and what are we seeing that's kind of new or noteworthy when it comes to exploitation and being vulnerable. So there's that. The other would be just literally around current events, news that's coming up. Is there research that's being published on something that kind of indicates that this might be a problem going forward? The Lapsus group I mentioned before, like the kind of the return of the chaotic actor. As an industry, we've been thinking about rational actors for a long time. So if chaotic ones kind of come back to the party, then maybe we're not prepared for that. Those sorts of things will unpack that internally and actually use it right across the team, because there's security folk, there's sales folk, there's marketing folk, there's people that have various degrees of security expertise. And the goal is really to get everyone on the same page and talking about it.
Very good. By the way, let me give credit to Ty Sabano, who's the CISO over at Vercel. That was his tip, and I think that's awesome. And that's awesome that you are actually doing that.
Yep.
What do you want to? And oh, by the way, I should also mention, if you watch the Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review show, which you can feel free to share with your staff, it's just 25 minutes, and we hit the 8 biggest stories of the week, and we have a security professional on who gives some context to the story, so gives some tips. Katie, you're nodding your head. Are you doing something like this or know of something like this?
Well, I've actually made a security flash video for BugCrowd. It's available on YouTube if you want to watch it. When I used to work for BugCrowd, obviously I don't make any more because I don't work for them. Sorry, you have to sponsor videos now, Casey, if you want me to.
I'll have my people call your people. Yeah.
I love this idea though. Like, genuinely, the medium of video is so good for engaging with people, and it's the next best thing to like walking up to somebody. One of my favorite stories is I was teaching a class of like undergraduates, their first time in cybersecurity, and the first thing I tell them is don't break the law. So they have the lovely legal and ethics presentation. And I was talking about some of the work that Casey does over at disclose.io about responsible disclosure. And I had a student put their hand up and I was like, yes, what's up? And he was like, wait, so you mean there's no protection for people acting ethically? Like there's no legal protection for that? I'm like, no. And you could just see this is somebody whose brain just clicked. And it's great to be able to do that one-on-one with a student, but I'm limited to what a classroom can contain of like 30 students at once. If I looked like my YouTube videos, they reach so many more people and they really have the reach and the accessibility. So I love the idea, like genuinely, what a fantastic idea to get people thinking about security. And I'd hope people could do it in a fun way as well, in an engaging way that makes people care about it too.
So I have to apologize. It was not Ty Sabato. I don't think he's here. It was Tyler Powell, and I only knew one Ty, and I assumed it because I was just communicating with Ty Sabato just a few days ago about coming to this chat. So I just kind of assumed it was him, but it's Tyler Powell. So my apologies, Tyler Powell. It is you. Thank you so much for that.
It's funny because I've literally chatted with Ty Sabano about this exact thing in terms of internal. So
I'm sure Ty Sabano would also give this tip as well. But it came from Tyler Powell, and so here's one: public service announcements. Again, speak up. This is also Ty Powell. Public service announcements. Again, Tyler Powell. Like the cool ones that they did during World War II. Don't let the Nazis win. Don't write down your passwords. So essentially,
keep calm and carry on.
Yeah,
spirit.
That's good. All right. Hey, let me do this. I'm gonna wrap up today's show, and then we're gonna get for final tips and advice. If you have not clicked the link at the bottom of the screen, please do that right now. Please click on the link at the bottom of the screen because we are going to be changing that very, very soon. So please click the link at the bottom of the screen to register for next Friday's Super Cyber Friday. And let me just sort of close out some other things. And we got a few more things. And I do want everyone to stick around for our meetup in a second. So the link at the bottom of the screen, which is going to change in seconds, is Hacking Open Source Security, which is next week. This is a really, really fascinating subject. And we actually touched upon it already right now because we mentioned Log4j. Because something like between 70 to 90% of all software is built on open source software. So having an open source security plan is key. Register by 5 p.m. By August 2nd, next Tuesday, and you're automatically entered in to win a CISO Series jacket. So why not just do it right now? All right, go ahead and change that link though, Aaron. Huge thanks to BugCrowd. That is Casey's company. Thank you so much, Casey, for sponsoring this very episode of Super Cyber Friday. We greatly appreciate it. Guess what? Starting in 90 minutes from now is our Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. So that starts at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We have Deneen DeFiore, who's the CISO of United Airlines. She'll be providing context to this week's stories in the news. It's on CISO Series LinkedIn channel, so check it out. Stick around for our meetup. Hey, it's changed. Go ahead. You can click on that link right now to join in the meetup portion. So we hope to see as many of you over there as possible. Tell your friends to join us. We do this every, I'll say, available Friday. We're going to be dark August 12th and 19th and possibly week after. Don't know yet. But every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And if you want to sponsor Super Cyber Friday, why don't you just email me at david@cisoseries.com. All right. We've come to the end of our show. We have about 6 minutes left. And that gives us a little bit of time. Let's go with some final advice here. And if we have time, we'll hit a few more questions. But Casey, final advice, and also any way people can follow up with you with and how BugCrowd is handling this very issue. And I know one thing they do is weekly bugs of the week, which is great.
Most certainly. So yeah, probably the best way to get in touch with me personally is via Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter DMs usually the hot one. So Casey John Ellis with a H. That's my contact deets there, and happy to jam, hear from folk and talk about this sort of thing. Bugcrowd.com. I think the link just went into chat. That's the site. There's the ability to sign up there as a researcher or sign up there as a potential customer, someone who wants to check out what we do. effectively what Bugcrowd's doing is basically giving access to the collective creativity of all of the hackers that operate in good faith around the world to be able to give context, kind of, relating back to what we're talking about here around risk and different, security problems that customers are needing to solve. So as a tip, I would really recommend, specifically with respect to just starting off with a vulnerability disclosure program, as in let's codify our ability to receive security feedback that's directly relevant to our organization from the outside world. Let's make sure there's a policy there that addresses things like safe harbor that Katie just mentioned before, so that people can give us that information and feel safe as they're doing that. And then as an organization on the receiving side, start to build the processes of being able to actually take that information and fitting it into all of the other stuff that you're doing when you need to in order to reduce risk. To me, that's a thing that's, it's got regulatory pressure on it now. I think there's a lot more people doing it today than there was when we first started out 10 years ago. And I think that's going to continue. So that is a source of intelligence in terms of what does the internet think is most, critical and impactful to me as an organization. To me, it's actually reflective of what the adversaries are thinking about as well. So it's definitely a good place to consider implementing, a process if you don't have one already.
Good point to make. By the way, both of you, please put your Twitter handles in the chat room as well. Katie, any last thoughts and advice on today's topic?
So my kind of advice for people watching is really, look, not everything in the news is actually going to affect you, but if you are you haven't got a dedicated security person who does this, nominate somebody, and it doesn't have to be someone who's super experienced. Nominate somebody to be that communicator, to make those connections with regular people, because at the end of the day, they're really our first line of defense, and we don't want to be known as the people who just send phishing emails to people. We want to be known as people who are cool and approachable and are good to chat to and tell interesting facts and tell fun stories and stuff like that. And I think the other thing is, really opening yourself up to hackers like me is super scary, and it is an entire thing, right? And there's a lot of bureaucracy, but please do, because the good hackers want to tell you. They are desperate to tell you. They genuinely go through so many hoops to tell you that you may as well make it super easy for them and just give them, an email address, a vulnerability disclosure program, and make that process super easy.
Plus, it's all public anyway.
It's all public anyway. Yeah, exactly.
It's all public anyway. All right, we actually have a couple of more minutes, and I do want to get to. I don't know. What do you find? My feeling is just your classic vulnerabilities like the Log4j is affecting more people than the high profile nation state attack stuff. But that stuff gets more general news play, which may cause greater fear. Casey, you agree, disagree?
I agree with that. I actually do think, prior to COVID, that was kind of an annoying phenomena of how this all got discussed, because it was definitely an over-indexing on nation states that were very targeted in what they want. And honestly, a lot of people that were concerned about it didn't really need to be. That did, as I mentioned before, shift, not fully, but to at least some degree during COVID, with those folk moving to more opportunistic attack strategies. So it's interesting because I think, with the nation states, they've kind of gone down market, so to speak, on how they're hacking. At the same time, the cyber criminals, who are now incredibly well funded because ransomware seems to be working pretty well, they're actually using techniques to look more like a nation state prior to COVID. So it's all getting a bit jumbled up, right? I think it's something to keep an eye on, but to your point, something not to over-index on. And also to your point, I think this issue of open source software vulnerability and the fact that anyone can exploit that stuff is actually a bigger problem right now.
Mm-hmm. Katie?
I'm going to say something controversial.
Go for it.
And that is, use it. If people are interested in cyber warfare, use that to open up a conversation. If they're already caring about it and they think that's an interesting thing to talk about, abuse that. Use that and tell them about all the cyber warfare attacks. Tell them about Stuxnet. Get them interested in security and get them thinking about how actually, how they might be, or how someone could just walk into, are they questioning people that just walk into their office? Or are they just assuming, oh, that's a guest, probably, I'm sure it'll be fine. Are they plugging something into a computer? No, it'll be fine. If that's what it takes to get people actually caring about it, use that. Give them the interesting facts. It's like science communication, right? The reason why the James Webb Space Telescope is on everyone's mind is because we love to see the pretty pictures, right? People use that as an avenue to talk about, all the important stuff about looking at the Big Bang and early galaxy formation. People are getting really technical stuff because people care about the pretty
There's
pictures.
nothing like a threat to get everyone to all of a sudden care, which is key.
Exactly.
To make it
Use
interesting.
it.
Yep.
You use it. I like it. All right, let's wrap this up. Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you very much, Casey. Thank you very much, Bug Crowd. Thank you, the audience. The chat room was alive. Thank you so, so much. Now, I need everybody to click the link at the bottom of the screen because I need all of you. And Katie and Casey, you're going to be there, right?
Yes, we will.
Click the link. Talk with Katie. Talk with Casey about all of this and a lot more. Tell them how panicked you are because they want to hear it. And they will hopefully direct the conversation appropriately. Click that link at the bottom. Let's meet up over on Toucan. Thank you, everybody. Take us out, Aaron.